This is Moconomy Business Talks, the podcast where real conversations meet real business.
He's the American success story, the son of a plumber and a cafeteria worker who went to night school at NYU for his business degree. Ken Langone fought his way onto a Wall Street that didn't want him and proceeded to put together some of the most important deals of his generation, culminating in co-founding Home Depot, now a national chain with 300,000 employees. But Langone's the first to say he can be rough around the edges, and he's not afraid to speak his mind, a supporter of Donald Trump who has real doubts about the president's approach to trade and to deficits. On this edition of Bloomberg Big Decisions, Ken Langone. Ken Langone, welcome to Big Decisions.
Thank you for having me.
You've spent a career making deals. Somebody you and I both know, and I think respect a lot, Tom Murphy,
Best.
always said to me,
The best.
You're better off missing 5 or 6 good deals than making one bad one.
Well, you know how I tell people about deals? I tell them the best deals I ever did were the ones I didn't do.
Well, let's talk about those. What are the ones you're glad you didn't do that would have been a big mistake?
I don't want to name names. Where I didn't understand what I was getting into. Where I didn't understand the business. Where the surviving company's management, it was obvious they didn't have the basic leadership skills. Because this is what it's all about. What makes Walmart the great company it was, and Kmart, which was a giant compared to Walmart when Walmart started, and it's now bankrupt, it's gone. Well, the old Kmart went bankrupt. It's now part of Sears, and they're struggling. What was the difference? People. Sam Walton and all the people he had around him, Tom Coughlin and David Glass. And now, more recently, Doug McMillan, the guy that runs it now, he's fabulous. It's people. It's always the people.
When you go in and you take a look at a deal, how do you assess the character of the leadership? What defines for you a good one from a not so good one?
Well, let me give you a specific example. I met Jeff Bezos out at the Allen Conference last year. And I told him I'd love to come out and spend some time with him. And he in turn said he'd like to meet Frank Blake, who ran Home Depot. He's retired now. So Frank and I agreed to fly out to Seattle and have lunch with Jeff. And we had lunch in his boathouse. And let me tell you why this guy is a huge winner. 2 fabulous, incredible ingredients like ham and cheese. Smart and humble. And we went out to learn from him. When I left, I felt my brain had been sucked out of my head. There's a leader. It's no accident that Amazon is a success that it is. Same with Gates. Same with the guys at Google. Look at the size of these companies. They're trillion-dollar companies today. Look at the size of them and say, what happened to General Motors and what happened to IBM and what happened? Hell, they had so much head start, it's unbelievable. And so I can't emphasize enough the people.
You talked about smart, you talked about humble. What about integrity? Because how many CEOs have had to step down in the last year, for example, because of the Me Too movement?
Okay.
What's gone wrong?
Well, the Me Too movement is something else altogether. And I want to say this right now. Les Moonves was and is a friend of mine, and he always will be. And I don't judge anybody. Whatever it is, if you do that, it's bad. There's no rationalization or none of that, okay? But if each of us don't remember the kindness of people, no matter what their sin, something's wrong with us. Look, I'm married. I'm going to be married 62 years in a month.
Congratulations.
Okay? Look, we're still nuts about each other. Don't ask me to explain something that is totally foreign to me. How a guy puts a hit on a woman or how he aggressively... but that isn't the point. It's wrong. Period. Flat. Wrong. And if you do it, you should be punished. Bingo. That's it.
And the board should be on top of it.
But that's not just the issue. It isn't just... That's one issue. You know, you want to be a CEO for 1 or 2 reasons. You want to be a CEO because you want to get something done, or you want to be a CEO because you want to say you're the CEO. Okay? Sometimes people are promoted for the wrong reason. And why? Because the people that made the decision like them, or they went to the right school, or they dress a certain way. Okay? I can't explain that. I can't explain it. I hope I don't do that. You know, I always feel that if I can get a person, a woman or a man, that can motivate other human beings, that's who I want. I want a killer. Not a killer in the sense somebody gets murdered. No, there's somebody out there will say, look, that's his Italian heritage. He's talking about killing somebody. Okay? What I'm saying to you is, it's always about the people, and do right. If you're going to fire somebody, leave them with their self-respect. I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of Jack Welch's, huge fan. Jack could call somebody into, and Larry Bossidy too, call somebody into a room and let them understand that they couldn't get the job done, but left them also with the notion they're good people and there's opportunities out there for them away from where they were. You know, firing is a necessary part of capitalism. But if you can't leave the person who didn't work with some degree of self-respect and hope, you're not a very good leader.
Talk about your investing now. You take a look at a lot of different opportunities. How do they come to you, and how do you sort out the wheat from the chaff? How do you pick out the good ones?
Always about the people. Jamie Dimon and I were on the board of Yum Brands together. And when Sandy fired him, I wanted Jamie to become the head of Home Depot. And Jamie came back and said, no, I want to stay in financial services. I knew I wanted to have a big bet on Jamie. And about 6 years ago, they had J.P. Morgan had some so-called TARP warrants. They were warrants that were issued to the government in connection with the TARP debt, which J.P. Morgan never wanted, didn't need it. We started buying those warrants. And J.P. Morgan today is I guess it's my second biggest holding after Home Depot.
Where do you think capitalism has worked the best? And by that I mean not for the individual, but for the country. Capitalism. You love capitalism.
I adore it.
That's what your book said. Why?
Because it works.
Does it work?
Absolutely.
How do you know it works? How do you see that?
I know it works by virtue of my own life. You know, my father wasn't a capitalist. He was a union plumber. He didn't make much money. My mother worked in the school cafeteria. So the only money they made by virtue of time in their hands. And here I show up and I have this, whatever you want to call it, talent or insight or whatever you want to call it, and I become a capitalist. I want to be careful I don't sound like I'm bragging. But I wish I had a nickel every time somebody told me how grateful they are for what I've done. That gives them employment and gives them opportunities to be capitalists.
Where do you think capitalism has worked the best? And by that I mean not for the individual, but for the society, for the country.
Wherever it's given a chance. What I don't understand is go to Hungary, go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, go all over the world where they disavow, where they hate capitalism, and look at the quality of life of the people that live there, and look at the quality of life of the people that live here. We have a lot of things wrong in America, but we have a whole lot of things right in America too. So the question to me is very simple. Which works better for everybody? And there's no doubt in my mind, capitalism. You want an example of socialism? Our current VA. Our government would screw up a free lunch. You turn the VA over to private sector and watch it fly. We'll get it right.
But it's not getting better for everybody. You can go to places not too far from where we're located right now, where people are living lives that you wouldn't want them to be living, and children are being raised in situations you wouldn't want them to be raised in. Why isn't capitalism helping there?
Because it's not allowed to. Let me tell you something right now. You're talking about, look at unemployment among the minorities in America today. Lowest it's been. That's good. Look at incomes. Look at job opportunities. Look at society in general in America. We're better off than we were. Now, I'm not going to argue the point that the capitalists made a mess here 10 years ago with this subprime debt crap they messed around with. You got to give them a lot of the blame. Not all of it. Not all of it. All of our hands are dirty. But the fact that it doesn't help 100% of the people doesn't mean it doesn't help 90% of the people. The better question is, what would the percentage be if you didn't have it? I argue it would be way down, much lower than 90 or whatever the hell it is. And the reason? Because capitalism works. Every time I have an incentive to hire you to make money for me, you got a job. And the more valuable you become to me, the more I have to pay you. And the more I pay you, the better your life is. But what I don't understand is, why aren't we addressing the issues that are going to determine quality of life and standard of living in America, namely education?
You raise subprime mortgages.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the government has to constrain capitalism sometimes? Did the government fall down in subprime mortgages?
No, the government made it easy. You go back and read in the early 90s about an inherent American right to own a home. No, you're wrong. People that aren't responsible shouldn't own homes. That's what scores are for. That's what credit ratings are for. Now, I'm not saying that it was that alone, but the environment was lush for excesses. And guess what? You give a guy a chance to make a buck, and he'll take advantage of it. May not be the right thing.
Are you concerned at all about the growing wealth and income inequality? Because
Yes.
it's not all because people aren't working hard.
I
There are
am.
other people working hard who don't have
I
the
just had a
opportunity.
meeting yesterday with the head of the Ford Foundation and Peter Georgescu in my office. We're making a major effort to do what we can about income inequality. But it's a two-headed monster. How can you pay kids a lot of money if they can't read and they can't write? How? We have kids at the Home Depot that make extraordinary sums of money from where they started. The woman that runs all of our U.S. stores today started out as a part-time cashier, okay? She's African-American from Jamaica. She runs 1,800 stores. And she makes a lot of money, and you know what? She's worth everything we pay her and more. That's capitalism. It works. Does it work for everybody? No, but everybody doesn't have the same energy level, the same drive, the same passion.
Yeah, but it's beyond drive and passion, it's also qualifications. When you said earlier, you pay people more because they're more valuable. Education and being prepared for the job is critically important. Let's go to education.
Yeah, okay, let's go to, remember
what can we do in this country to fix our public education system?
Let me go back to me. So you got a benchmark where you can reference, okay? 8 weeks into my college career, a professor calls me in, throws an exam book on the table and said, "That's the worst English I've ever seen in my life." And he scolds me for my English. And then before he beats me up too bad, he says, "But I'm glad I struggled because you get it. You understand economics. How you doing?" I said, "Not very well. How about your other classes?" I said, "About as bad as I'm doing with you." He was, "You're going to be out of here in January." I said, "I know it." "Is that what you want to happen?" I said, "No, I don't." So he says to me, "If I make an effort to help you, will you do your part?" I said, "Yeah." And then he asked me a question. He said, "Did anybody ever tell you were stupid?" I said, "Yeah, a lot of people." And he said to me, "You know, the sad thing is not that they did, but that you believe them." You start by encouraging kids that inside each of them is something good, something valuable, and something that deserves to be developed. And you don't like it. We have a charter school in Harlem, and people say, "Well, yeah, look, you go, there's the school programs and all this and all that and the other thing." And then they'll say, "But you know, you got to understand that these kids started at a disadvantage with their home life." And I say, guess what? If you acknowledge that, then you have to do more to make up for what those kids don't have at home. Don't use it as an excuse. Use it as a reason to extend yourself. How do you start? I'm sorry, quality of instruction. That's where it begins. Quality of instruction. Teachers should, at the minimum, be able to master the subject they're teaching.
Right now, we don't have the education system you just described. We don't have teachers who are fully qualified. We don't have teachers who are encouraging. Well, you tell me, what can be done? How do we get from where we are now to where you think we should get to?
This now becomes political, okay? And I don't know how to get around that. I know how. First of all, these teachers' unions throw enormous sums of money at campaigns. These dues, they're staggering. Guess what? Go ask Chuck Schumer if he's willing to take on the public school teachers union. You can bet your sweet bottom he won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because that's part of his constituency. And yet he's raising hell about a kid not being allowed to come into Texas from Mexico. We got these kids here that we're not doing much for, and we're worried about bringing kids in. That's why I make my analogy. You got 9 kids, you can't feed them, so you and your wife decide to solve the problem. She gets pregnant again, and you have the 10th kid. We've got a serious problem in America in public education, and it must be dealt with. And it's got to be dealt with objectively, without any sacred cows. Any.
Is that a federal issue or is that a state issue?
It starts out by being a home issue. But if there isn't a home, then we as a society have to make up for what the kid doesn't start with in his home. Okay, and then you go from there.
President Trump wasn't your first choice, wasn't your second choice, but you came to really believe in some of the things that he stood for.
He won by default.
President Trump wasn't your first choice, wasn't your second choice, but you came to really believe in some of the things that he stood for.
He won by default. My vote. He won by default. Look.
But you agree with him on some important issues.
I agree on a lot of issues. You know, somebody told me, forget about what he says, watch what he does. My grandparents were immigrants. I am pro-immigrant. But I know my grandparents had to come through Ellis Island, and they had to fill out papers, and they had to do all the things they had to do, and they couldn't wait for the day they became an American citizen. We need immigrants badly in America, badly. But this notion, drop it and let whoever wants to come in, come in. Do you want the bad eye? You want the MS-13? Go out to Long Island and look what's going on out there. I wish Trump had a different style. But guess what? I'm wrong. That's the style that got him elected.
Not everybody who did support President Trump is supporting him on all the issues. For example, the Koch network. Charles Koch's been very outspoken on 2 issues, spending and trade.
Look, I am bothered by the spending. I'm very bothered by the spending. So at some point, the Grim Reaper shows up. We cannot long suffer trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. There's no way to rationalize that it's okay to have this kind of debt. At some point, we're going to pay the price.
And what about trade?
Look, if this is a ploy, God bless him.
What if it's not a ploy?
If he, honest to God, believes that tariffs are the way, go back to the 30s and Smoot-Haley. It doesn't work. You know what? If he's a passionate believer, and it's an end in and of itself, as a rather than a means to an end, if he's a passionate believer, he's going to pay a price. What price? Might not get reelected in 20. Because if this thing backs up on him, look, understand something. He said something the other night. By the way, I find his appearances humorous. Really, I mean, I was listening to him in Columbus, Ohio, and he said something very profound. He said, I don't blame the Chinese leaders. He said, I blame our people who made it easy for them. But the point is, how do we get to where we are? Explain to me why, when we ship a car to Germany, an automobile, the tariff is multiples of the tariff they pay to have a car come into America. Explain to me how it happens that China ends up, forget the $500 billion, they're arguing that point. They say it's only $350 billion, so that's because the $350 makes the point. How does China end up with a trade surplus of $350 billion a year?
Well, how much of that is because we're buying the stuff? We don't have to buy the stuff, Ken. And the fact is, when we're running a big budget deficit, you almost bake in a trade deficit.
Remember this. They need us. They have the surplus, not us. So that tells me that we've got leverage. When a vendor comes to Home Depot to sell Home Depot a product, he wants access to our customers through our boxes. We have leverage. We America are the Home Depots to China. Where's the leverage to say, hey guys, come on, maybe we'll have a better deal for our people? Intellectual property. I mean, these are all valid points. And what has every other guy done in the past? Push it down a road, let it go.
Right, Ken, but on intellectual property, which I think everyone agrees is a real problem with China,
Right.
The Europeans are on our side on that. If you're CEO, isn't the smart move to get the other folks on your side to go after China rather than make enemies of them at the same time?
David, let's go back to the beginning of this discussion. If I were Trump, I'd have squared my issues quietly with Mexico and Germany and said, okay, now let's go get them. Okay? Guess what? I'm prepared to say that his way may be right. We're going to see. But I wouldn't have done it. I said to you earlier, I said his method leaves something to decide on my part. But God, he won the election.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people in America saying, I should have run. He won. Why? I could have won.
So he ran as a great CEO, wanted to be CEO of America. Given what you said about great CEOs, would you put him in charge of a major corporation as a CEO? Would you hire him?
I don't think he was a CEO. I think he was a real estate speculator and developer. Big difference. Look. I don't think he was bragging about his business career. He had more bankruptcies, Christ, than God had children. I think he was saying the right things. Make America great again. Who's caring about you in Ashtabula, Ohio, and Youngstown, Ohio, and Akron, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? Like it or not, look at those rallies. And they stay there for hours. They wait 10 hours to get a seat in front.
So as you approach the midpoint of your career.
Yeah, I'm getting there, right?
Getting there. Looking back, as you did in this book, what would you have done differently if you had to do over again?
You know my problem with that question? If I move this thing up here, what happens to that thing down here?
The butterfly effect.
Right. I have to look at the totality and say, I made a lot of bad decisions. I made some good decisions. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things right. I think it's a risky game. I wish, for example, that I didn't always get pissed off. I was more rational when I was angry. I wish for that. I still wish for that. I wish I had more compassion and understanding for people. You never have enough of that. And so I wish I had more sensitivity to the plight of other people. And I still do. I wish I was more interested in history as a kid. I can't get enough of history now. I wish I didn't swear so much. But I find certain bad words very expressive and to the point. There's no doubt in my mind if I hadn't met and married my wife, I wouldn't be where I am. I know for sure, without her, without Elaine, this wouldn't happen.
Well, we're glad it happened.
I'm thrilled it happened. And look, I'm not done.
Ken Langone, thanks so much for being here.